Virgin gave twins to a man who couldn't have children, and he found out during the Birthmust. For more love stories like this, subscribe, like, and comment where you're from. The fluorescent lights of the medical clinic hummed overhead as Emily Carter signed her name on the dotted line. Her hand trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of what she was about to do. At 23, she had made many difficult decisions in her life, but none quite like this. "Are you absolutely certain, Miss Carter?" Dr. Patricia Morgan's voice was gentle but firm. "This is a legally binding agreement. Once the procedure is complete, you'll carry this pregnancy to term as a surrogate for Mr. Thompson." Emily nodded, her honey-colored eyes fixed on the contract before her. The numbers swam on the page: $50,000 upon confirmation of pregnancy, another $100,000 upon successful delivery. It was more money than she had seen in her entire life. Enough to pay off her mother's medical debts, enough to give her younger sister Sarah a chance at college, enough to finally escape the crushing poverty that had defined their existence in the small town of Millbrook, Pennsylvania. "I'm certain," Emily whispered, though her heart hammered against her ribs. She had read every word of the agreement a dozen times. James Thompson, wealthy entrepreneur and owner of Thompson Technologies, sought a surrogate to carry his biological child. His wife had passed away 3 years prior from cancer, and he wanted a child to carry on his legacy. The contract was clear. Emily would have no parental rights, no contact with the child after birth, and would relocate during the pregnancy to maintain privacy. What the contract didn't say, what Dr. Morgan had explained in careful clinical terms, was that James Thompson had been told by multiple specialists that he was infertile due to complications from a childhood illness. He had undergone experimental treatment, storing genetic material before it was too late, but the chances of conception were almost impossible. Almost. Emily had been chosen from hundreds of applicants. Young, healthy, with no genetic abnormalities in her family history. She was also, as the invasive medical examination had confirmed, a virgin, something that had been noted in her file with clinical detachment, but had made her cheeks burn with embarrassment. In Millbrook, where everyone knew everyone else's business, Emily had been too busy surviving to think about romance. After her father's death when she was 16, she had worked 3 jobs to support her mother through chemotherapy and to keep food on the table for Sarah. There had been no time for dates, no energy for the fumbling experiments of teenage love. Her virginity wasn't a choice born of moral conviction. It was simply a casualty of circumstance. "The procedure will be scheduled for next week," Dr. Morgan continued, gathering the signed documents. "We'll use in vitro fertilization. You'll stay in the facility for observation, and then you'll move to the residence Mr. Thompson has arranged for you in Ridgemont, about 2 hours from here." Ridgemont. Emily had heard of it. A picturesque town nestled in the Allegheny Mountains, known for its autumn festivals and old money families. It might as well have been on another planet for someone like her. Will I meet him, Mr. Thompson?" The question escaped before Emily could stop it. Dr. Morgan's expression softened. "That's not typical in these arrangements, Miss Carter. Mr. Thompson values his privacy, and the contract specifies minimal contact to avoid emotional complications." Emotional complications. The phrase echoed in Emily's mind as she left the clinic, clutching the envelope containing her first payment. A check that would clear her mother's hospital bills and leave enough for Sarah's first semester at community college. The spring air was cool against her skin as she walked to the bus stop, her worn sneakers scuffing against the cracked pavement. Millbrook spread before her, a patchwork of struggling storefronts, abandoned factories, and neighborhoods where hope seemed to have packed its bags and left decades ago. The steel mill that had once been the town's heart had closed when Emily was a child, and nothing had risen to take its place. She thought about the child she would carry. Would it have her auburn hair, her freckles scattered across pale skin, or would it favor its father, this James Thompson she had never met, but had researched obsessively online? The photographs showed a man in his late 30s, dark-haired with sharp features and eyes that seemed to look through the camera rather than at it, handsome in a remote, untouchable way, wealthy beyond her imagination. The bus was nearly empty, smelling of diesel and old upholstery. Emily found a seat by the window and pressed her forehead against the cool glass. In 1 week, her body would no longer be entirely her own. She would become a vessel, a temporary home for someone else's dream. Her phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. "Mom's asking about you. When will you be home?" Emily typed back quickly. "Soon. Everything's fine. Tell her I got the job." It wasn't entirely a lie. She had gotten a job, just not the kind her mother could ever know about. The official story was that Emily had been hired as a live-in caregiver for an elderly woman in Ridgemont, with room and board provided and excellent pay. Her mother, weakened by years of illness, had accepted the explanation with grateful tears. The guilt sat heavy in Emily's stomach, but she pushed it down. This was the only way. This was survival. A week later, Emily found herself back in the sterile environment of the medical facility, dressed in a hospital gown and staring at the ceiling as Dr. Morgan explained the procedure one final time. The room was cold, or perhaps that was just her nerves manifesting as shivers across her skin. "You may experience some cramping afterward," Dr. Morgan said, her gloved hands precise and efficient. "But the embryos we're transferring are of excellent quality. Mr. Thompson's genetic material, despite the low viability prognosis, has actually shown remarkable resilience in the laboratory." Embryos, plural. Emily's eyes widened. "How many?" "3. It's standard practice to increase the chances of success. Most likely none will implant given Mr. Thompson's fertility issues. There's a small chance one might take. The probability of multiples is extremely low." Emily nodded, though unease prickled at the back of her mind. She had signed the papers. There was no turning back now. The procedure itself was quick, clinical, devoid of any intimacy, despite its profound purpose. Afterward, Emily lay still for an hour as instructed, staring at the acoustic tiles above her and wondering what she had just done. 2 weeks of waiting followed. Emily moved through her remaining days in Millbrook in a fog, saying goodbye to the shabby apartment she had shared with her mother and Sarah, packing her meager belongings into 2 suitcases. Sarah cried, clinging to her at the bus station. Their mother, too weak to make the trip, had held Emily's face in her thin hands and whispered, "You're so brave, my girl. So brave." If only they knew the truth. The pregnancy test came back positive on a Tuesday morning. Dr. Morgan called personally, her voice carrying a note of surprise. "Congratulations, Miss Carter. The procedure was successful. You'll need to come in for an ultrasound in a few weeks to confirm viability." Emily's hand went to her stomach, still flat and unchanged. Inside her cells were dividing, multiplying, forming something that would become a person who would never know her name. She moved to Ridgemont on a grey April day. The house Mr. Thompson had arranged was a cottage on the outskirts of town, charming in a storybook way with its stone exterior and climbing roses that would bloom later in the summer. A lawyer had met her at the property, providing keys and explaining that all her expenses would be covered, all her needs met. She was to check in with Dr. Morgan weekly and avoid any strenuous activity. "Mr. Thompson appreciates your discretion," the lawyer said, his expression professionally neutral. "He wishes you a healthy pregnancy." And then Emily was alone. The cottage was furnished simply but comfortably. Large windows overlooked a forest that seemed to stretch endlessly into the mountains. It was beautiful, peaceful, and utterly isolating. Emily had never lived alone before. The silence was oppressive. She tried to settle into a routine. Morning walks in the forest, afternoons reading the pregnancy books that had been left for her, evenings watching the sun set over the mountains. The town of Ridgemont itself was a 15-minute drive away. She had been provided a modest sedan for transportation, but she rarely ventured there, afraid of questions, of accidentally revealing her secret. The first ultrasound changed everything. Dr. Morgan's office in Ridgemont was in a modern medical building that seemed out of place among the town's historic architecture. Emily lay on the examination table, her shirt pulled up to expose her still flat abdomen, as the doctor moved the ultrasound wand across her skin. "There," Dr. Morgan said, her voice catching slightly. "Oh my!" Emily's eyes flew to the monitor. She couldn't make sense of the grey and black images, the abstract shapes that supposedly held meaning. "What is it? Is something wrong?" "Not wrong, exactly." Dr. Morgan's professional composure had cracked, revealing genuine astonishment. "Miss Carter, you're carrying twins, both with strong heartbeats. This is extraordinary given Mr. Thompson's prognosis." Twins. The word echoed in Emily's mind as she drove back to the cottage, her hands gripping the steering wheel with white knuckles. Twins, two babies, two children who would be taken from her the moment they entered the world. She thought she had prepared herself for one. But two? That night, Emily lay awake in the cottage's bedroom, her hands resting on her stomach. She tried to feel something, some sense of the lives growing inside her. But there was only the steady rhythm of her own heartbeat and the distant sound of wind through the trees. She had signed a contract, she had made a promise, and Emily Carter, despite everything life had thrown at her, had never broken a promise. But as the weeks passed and her body began to change, as the subtle swell of her abdomen became visible and the flutter of movement inside her grew stronger, Emily found her resolve beginning to crack. She talked to them sometimes, the twins, when she was alone in the cottage, told them stories about Millbrook, about their grandmother who was fighting so hard to stay alive, about their Aunt Sarah who wanted to be a teacher. She wondered about their father, this James Thompson who had created them but would raise them alone. What kind of man was he? What kind of father would he be? The contract stipulated no contact, but Emily found herself driving past Thompson Technologies one afternoon, a sprawling modern complex on the other side of Ridgemont. She parked across the street, watching employees come and go, wondering if one of them was him. She never saw James Thompson, but she felt his presence everywhere. In the cottage he provided, in the checks that arrived like clockwork to cover her expenses, in the life growing inside her that was his but not hers. Summer came to Ridgemont, transforming the cottage's garden into a riot of colour. Emily's body bloomed along with it, her belly swelling with the twins' growth. She was healthy, the doctor said. The babies were thriving. Everything was proceeding according to plan. Except for the feelings Emily couldn't suppress, no matter how hard she tried. The love that crept in with each kick, each hiccup, each moment of connection with the children she was supposed to give away without looking back. By the time autumn arrived, painting the mountains in shades of gold and crimson, Emily had come to a terrible realization. She didn't know if she could let them go, but the contract was clear. The money had been paid. Her mother's debts were cleared. Sarah was in school, and they were depending on the remaining payment to survive. Emily was trapped by her own choices, bound by desperation to a promise she wasn't sure she could keep. And James Thompson, the father of her children, remained a ghost, powerful, present, but forever out of reach. October brought the first frost to Ridgemont, and with it, a complication no one had anticipated. Emily stood in the produce section of Morrison's market, her hand resting unconsciously on her swollen belly, when she felt the eyes on her. She had grown somewhat bolder about venturing into town. At 7 months pregnant, the isolation of the cottage had become unbearable, and Dr. Morgan had encouraged gentle exercise and social interaction for her mental health. "Excuse me," a warm voice said behind her. "I couldn't help but notice. Are you new to Ridgemont?" Emily turned to find a woman about her age, with kind brown eyes and dark curly hair pulled back in a messy bun. She wore paint-splattered jeans and an oversized sweater, and carried a basket filled with what appeared to be art supplies along with groceries. Yes," Emily managed, instinctively defensive. "I've been here since spring. I'm Rachel Morrison. Well, Rachel Thompson Morrison. My family owns this store, but I married into the Morrison name." She laughed, a sound like wind chimes. "I'm sorry, I don't mean to pry. It's just that Ridgemont is small, and I thought I knew everyone. Plus, I'm pregnant too." She gestured to her own belly, less prominent than Emily's, but definitely there. "Due in February. You?" "December," Emily said softly. Then, because Rachel's openness seemed to invite honesty, she added, "Twins." "Twins! How wonderful!" Rachel's enthusiasm was genuine, infectious. "You must be terrified and excited all at once. Do you have family here? A husband?" The questions Emily had been dreading. "No, It's complicated. I'm staying in a cottage outside town. Temporary arrangement." Something flickered in Rachel's eyes. Understanding, perhaps, or curiosity. But she didn't push. Instead, she simply smiled and said, "Well, if you ever need anything, or just want someone to talk to about swollen ankles and weird cravings, Morrison's Market is here 6 days a week. I'm usually in the back, painting when I should be working." It was the beginning of an unlikely friendship. Rachel didn't ask invasive questions, didn't demand Emily's secrets. Instead, she offered companionship without conditions. They began meeting for tea at a cafe on Main Street, or taking slow walks through Ridgemont's historic downtown when the weather permitted. Rachel talked about her own pregnancy, her husband David, who ran a construction company, her dreams of opening an art gallery someday. Emily listened more than she spoke, revealing little about herself beyond the basics. But in Rachel's presence, she felt less alone, less like a ghost haunting her own life. It was during one of these walks, as November winds scattered leaves across the sidewalk, that Rachel asked the question Emily had been avoiding. "The father," Rachel said carefully, "is he involved at all? Or is this truly something you're doing on your own?" Emily's throat tightened. He'll be involved after. He wants the babies. I'm carrying them for him." Understanding dawned in Rachel's expression. Oh, Emily, you're a surrogate." The word hung between them, both accurate and desperately insufficient to describe the complexity of Emily's situation. "It's a private arrangement," Emily said quickly. "I can't really talk about it." Rachel nodded, squeezing Emily's hand. "I understand, and I won't pry. But Emily, please know, what you're doing is incredibly selfless. Those babies are lucky to have had you caring for them." Lucky. The word twisted in Emily's heart. Would they feel lucky, growing up never knowing her? Would James Thompson tell them about her at all, or would she be erased from their history entirely? That night, alone in the cottage, Emily felt the twins moving inside her, one pressing against her ribs, the other turning somersaults lower in her belly. She had begun to tell them apart by their movements. Baby A, as the doctors called them, was quiet, gentle. Baby B was active, restless, constantly making their presence known. She had promised herself she wouldn't name them, wouldn't let herself imagine their faces, their personalities, the people they would become. But in the darkness, her resolve crumbled. "Lily," she whispered to baby A. "And Jack for you," she said to baby B, even though she didn't know their genders. The names felt right, felt real. They made the twins more than just medical designations, more than just a contract fulfilled. The following week brought an unexpected development. Dr. Morgan called Emily in for an additional ultrasound, concern evident in her voice. "One of the twins is measuring slightly smaller than expected," the doctor explained as Emily lay on the examination table. "It's not critical yet, but I want to monitor you more closely. Weekly appointments from now on." Fear coiled in Emily's stomach. Are they okay? Both of them. Their heartbeats are strong, and they're both active, but twin B is growing at a slower rate. It could be twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome, though the signs aren't definitive yet. Twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome. Emily had read about it in her pregnancy books, a condition where twins sharing a placenta had an imbalance in blood flow, with one twin receiving too much and the other too little. It could be dangerous, even fatal. What do we do? Emily's voice trembled. "We watch carefully. If it worsens, we may need to deliver early. I'm also going to recommend that we inform Mr. Thompson of this development." "No!" The word burst from Emily before she could stop it. I mean, the contract says minimal contact. He doesn't want to be bothered with details. Dr. Morgan's expression was firm. Miss Carter, these are his children. He has a right to know if there are medical complications. That evening, Emily received a phone call from an unknown number. Her heart hammered as she answered. Miss Carter, this is James Thompson. The voice was deep, controlled, but she could hear the strain beneath the surface. This was the first time they had spoken directly, the first time the ghost had become real. Mr. Thompson, she managed, her mouth dry. Dr. Morgan informed me about the complications with the twins. I want you to know that you have access to the best medical care available. Whatever is needed, specialists, treatments, anything, will be provided. Thank you, Emily whispered. There was a pause, heavy with unspoken words. Then, how are you? Are you in any pain? The question surprised her. It suggested concern for her, not just for the babies she carried. I'm fine, just worried about them. They're fighters, James said quietly. They've already beaten the odds just by existing. Dr. Morgan said my chances of biological children were nearly impossible. Emily heard something in his voice. Wonder, perhaps, or disbelief. She wanted to tell him about their movements, about how baby A seemed to sleep when baby B was active, how they seemed to communicate through gentle nudges, but the words stuck in her throat. I should let you rest, James said. But, Miss Carter, Emily, thank you for everything you're doing. The line went dead, leaving Emily staring at her phone. He had used her first name. Such a small thing, but it cracked something open inside her. The careful wall she had built between herself and this man whose children she carried. The following weeks were a blur of medical appointments, each one carefully monitoring the twins' progress. The size discrepancy persisted, but didn't worsen significantly. Emily was placed on modified bed rest, allowed only gentle movement around the cottage. Rachel visited often, bringing groceries and conversation. She never mentioned the phone call with James, never pressed for details about the arrangement. But Emily could see the questions in her friend's eyes, the concern that went beyond simple kindness. One afternoon, as Emily dozed on the cottage sofa, Rachel answered a knock at the door. Emily woke to raised voices, Rachel's, sharp with protection, and another voice, male and authoritative. I'm sorry, but Emily is resting, and she's not expecting visitors, Rachel was saying. I'm James Thompson. I have every right to check on my children. Emily's eyes flew open. She struggled to sit up, her heavy belly making the movement awkward. Rachel, it's okay. Let him in. Rachel hesitated, then stepped aside. And for the first time, Emily came face to face with the father of her children. He was taller than she expected, broader in the shoulders. The photographs hadn't captured the intensity of his presence, the way his dark eyes seemed to take in everything at once. He wore expensive clothes casually, dark jeans, a wool sweater, and looked utterly out of place in the cottage's modest living room. Mr. Thompson, Emily said, aware of how she must look, dishevelled from sleep, wearing stretched leggings and an oversized shirt, her hair in a messy braid. James, please. His eyes went to her belly, and something flickered across his face. Awe, perhaps, or fear. I apologize for coming unannounced. Dr. Morgan mentioned you were on bed rest, and I needed to see for myself that you were being properly cared for. Rachel's eyes darted between them, understanding dawning. You're the father, she said flatly. You're the one she's carrying for. James's jaw tightened. Yes, and you're just now showing up? 7 months in? Rachel, Emily started, but her friend cut her off. No, Emily, this is ridiculous. You've been alone here, dealing with complications, and he's been what? Hiding, sending checks and pretending that's enough? You don't understand the situation, James said, his voice tight. Then explain it to me. Explain why she's isolated in this cottage, why she jumps every time the phone rings, why she looks at her own belly like it's going to be ripped away from her. The words struck Emily like physical blows. She had thought she was hiding it better, the grief that had been building alongside the twins' growth. Rachel, please, Emily said quietly. It's not his fault. I signed the contract. I understood the terms. James was staring at Emily now, really seeing her for the first time. "You're afraid," he said softly. "You're afraid of giving them up." The truth hung in the air, undeniable. Emily felt tears spring to her eyes, and she hated herself for the weakness. "This is why the contract specified minimal contact," James continued, but his voice had lost its edge. He sank into a chair, suddenly looking exhausted. "This is exactly what I was trying to avoid." "Human feelings?" Rachel's voice dripped with sarcasm. "How inconvenient for you." "Rachel, could you give us a moment?" Emily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Rachel looked like she wanted to refuse, but after a long moment, she nodded. "I'll be in the kitchen. Holler if you need me." When they were alone, silence filled the space between Emily and James. She could hear the clock ticking on the mantel, the wind rustling the trees outside. "Tell me about them," James said finally. "The twins. What are they like?" Emily's hand went to her belly, finding the familiar bulges where tiny feet pressed against her skin. "Baby A is gentle, quiet. Baby B never stops moving, like they're impatient to get out and explore the world." She paused, then added softly, "I call them Lily and Jack. Just in my head. I know I shouldn't have named them." "Lily and Jack," James repeated, testing the names. "My mother's name was Lillian, and Jack, that was my brother's name. He died when we were children." Emily's breath caught. She had chosen the names randomly, or so she thought. But perhaps some invisible thread connected her to this man, to his history, to the children they had created together in the most impersonal way possible. "I didn't know," she whispered, "about your family." "Why would you? The contract didn't require my life story." James leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I lost my wife, Elena, 3 years ago. Cancer. We had tried for years to have a child, but my illness as a child, complications from meningitis, left me infertile. Or so every doctor told us. Elena died believing we would never have children." The pain in his voice was raw, unguarded. Emily felt her own eyes fill with tears. "When they told me there might be a chance, using the genetic material I had stored years ago, I had to try, for Elena, to have something of us continue in the world." He looked up, meeting Emily's gaze. "I never expected it to work. I certainly never expected twins. And I never expected—" "What?" Emily prompted when he trailed off. "You. I never expected you to be real, to matter. In my mind, this was a transaction, clinical, safe." He laughed, a bitter sound. "I was a fool." "The contract—" Emily started. "Damn the contract," James said with sudden vehemence. "We're talking about human beings. About children who will have questions someday, who will want to know where they came from, who carried them, who cared enough to give them life. You can tell them I was just a surrogate," Emily said, though the words cost her. "That I was paid to do a job." James shook his head. "Is that what you want them to believe, that they were just a transaction?" Emily thought about Lily and Jack growing inside her, thought about the stories she had whispered to them, the promises she had made in the darkness of sleepless nights. "I want them to be happy," she said finally. "I want them to have everything I never had. Security, love, a real home. That's why I did this. Not for the money, not really. For them." "And what about what you want, Emily?" James's voice was gentle now, coaxing. "What do you want?" The question broke something inside her. The tears came in earnest now, and with them the truth she had been hiding even from herself. "I want to keep them," she sobbed. "God help me, I know I can't. I know they're not mine, but I want to keep them so badly it's tearing me apart." She expected anger, accusations of breach of contract. Instead, James moved to sit beside her on the sofa. He didn't touch her, but his presence was solid, grounding. "What if," he said carefully, "there was another way?" Emily looked up at him through her tears. "What do you mean?" "I don't know yet. But this," he gestured between them, "this isn't working. The contract assumed this would be simple, clinical, but life is never simple. And these children," his hand hovered over her belly, not quite touching, "they've already complicated everything just by existing. Baby B chose that moment to kick, hard enough that the movement was visible through Emily's shirt. James's eyes widened. "Was that?" "That's Jack," Emily said with a watery smile. "He does that when he hears new voices. I think he's curious about you." "Jack," James repeated, his voice full of wonder. Then, hesitantly, "May I?" Emily nodded, and James placed his hand gently on her belly. They sat like that for a long moment, feeling the twins move beneath his palm. His children, her children, their children. "We'll figure this out," James said finally. "Together. Somehow we'll find a way that doesn't destroy you, doesn't destroy them, doesn't destroy what they've already become." It wasn't a promise of happy endings. It wasn't a solution to the impossible situation they found themselves in. But it was hope, fragile and uncertain, blooming in the space between them. And for now, that was enough. November brought transformation to Ridgemont and to the unlikely connection growing between Emily and James. After that first meeting at the cottage, James began to visit regularly. At first, his visits were brief and awkward. Updates on the nursery he was preparing, questions about Emily's health, stilted conversations that danced around the enormity of their situation. But gradually, the walls between them began to crumble. It started with practical matters. James noticed the cottage's heating system was inadequate for the approaching winter and had it replaced within days. When Emily mentioned craving a specific type of apple only available at an orchard 2 hours away, a basket appeared on her doorstep the next morning. These gestures of care went beyond contractual obligation, beyond simple provision for the twins' well-being. "You don't have to do all this," Emily said one afternoon as James installed a new bookshelf in the cottage's living room. He had arrived that morning, claiming the existing shelves were unstable and potentially dangerous. Emily suspected he just needed something to do with his hands, a way to feel useful in a situation where control was an illusion. "I want to," James replied, focusing intently on aligning the brackets. "Besides, you'll need more storage once the twins are born. Baby books, toys, all that." The casual mention of "once the twins are born" hung in the air. They still hadn't discussed what would happen after the delivery, how they would navigate the minefield of the contract versus their growing connection. "James," Emily said carefully, "we need to talk about what comes next." He set down his drill, his expression guarded. "I know. The contract is clear. After delivery, I have no rights, no contact. You take the twins, and I disappear from their lives. Is that what you want?" Emily's hand went to her belly, where Lily and Jack were currently engaged in what felt like an acrobatic performance. "What I want doesn't matter. This isn't about me, isn't it?" James moved to sit across from her, his dark eyes intense. "Emily, you're carrying them. Your body is sustaining them. Your voice is the first one they hear. Your heartbeat the rhythm they know. How can this not be about you? Because I'm paid to do this. Because I signed away my rights. Because—" Her voice broke. "Because loving them doesn't change the facts." The admission slipped out before she could stop it. Loving them. She had finally said it aloud. James was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I've been thinking about my brother, Jack, the one who died when we were kids." The sudden change of subject threw Emily off balance. "What happened to him?" "Leukemia. He was 6, I was 8. I remember sitting in hospital waiting rooms, watching my parents try to hold it together. They never let us see them cry, never showed how scared they were. They thought they were protecting me." James's jaw tightened. "But I knew. Children always know." "I'm sorry," Emily whispered. "After he died, our house became a mausoleum. His room stayed exactly as he left it. My parents rarely spoke his name, as if silence could somehow lessen the pain. They thought they were helping me move on, but all they did was teach me that loss meant erasure." Emily understood what he was saying. "You don't want Lily and Jack to grow up with that silence, with pieces of their story missing. They deserve the whole truth. All of it, including you. The contract—" "I don't care about the contract." James's voice rose, then softened. "I'm sorry, I've been meeting with lawyers, with counselors, trying to find a way to modify our agreement. There has to be some arrangement where you can remain in their lives. Hope fluttered in Emily's chest, dangerous and seductive. What kind of arrangement? I don't know yet. But Emily, you're not just some stranger who carried my children. You're... He struggled for words. You're important. To them, and to... He stopped himself, but Emily heard what he didn't say. To him, too. James, we barely know each other. Then let's change that. He leaned forward, earnest. Tell me about yourself. The real you, not just the medical history and background check my lawyers compiled. Emily hesitated. Her instinct was to deflect, to maintain the distance that safety required. But the twins were moving inside her, reminding her that distance was already an illusion. I grew up in Millbrook, she began slowly. A town that's been dying for decades. My dad worked at the steel mill until it closed. He took odd jobs after that, but the stress... He had a heart attack when I was 16. Died before the ambulance arrived. James's expression was pained, but he didn't interrupt. Mum got cancer about a year later. No insurance, bills piling up. I dropped out of school to work. 3 jobs, sometimes 4. Sarah, my little sister, was only 12. I had to keep things together for her. That's why you needed the money, James said quietly. Mum's cancer treatment cleaned us out, destroyed any savings, any hope of college for Sarah. When I saw your advertisement for a surrogate, I thought... Emily laughed, a hollow sound. I thought it was the answer to everything, a way to save my family without anyone getting hurt. And now? Now I'm realizing you can't protect people from pain by sacrificing yourself. It just spreads the hurt around differently. James reached across the space between them, hesitating before taking her hand. His palm was warm, solid. You're one of the bravest people I've ever met. I'm not brave. I'm desperate. There's a difference. No, James said firmly. Desperation makes people reckless. You were strategic, self-sacrificing. You put everyone else first. And look where it got me. Emily tried to pull her hand away, but James held firm. It got you here. With 2 healthy babies who are going to change the world just by being in it. It brought you to Ridgemont, where you met Rachel. Don't think I haven't noticed she's become important to you. And it brought you to me. The words hung between them, loaded with meaning neither was quite ready to examine. Over the following weeks, James's visits became daily occurrences. He brought lunch and stayed to share it with her. He read pregnancy books and asked endless questions about what Emily was experiencing. When she mentioned her back hurt, he researched prenatal massage techniques and carefully, respectfully helped ease the tension in her muscles. Rachel watched this development with knowing eyes. "He's falling for you," she said one afternoon when James had left to attend a business meeting. "Don't be ridiculous. This is about the babies. Emily, I've seen the way he looks at you. And more importantly, I've seen the way you look at him when you think no one's watching." Emily's cheeks burned. "Even if that were true, which it's not, it doesn't matter. Our situation is impossible." "Why?" "Because of some contract. Contracts can be renegotiated." "It's not that simple. James is wealthy, successful, used to getting what he wants. I'm nobody from nowhere with nothing to offer." Rachel grabbed Emily's shoulders, forcing her to meet her eyes. "Listen to me. You are carrying his children. You have given him the one thing all his money couldn't buy, a family. That makes you the most important person in his world right now, whether either of you wants to admit it or not." That night, alone in the cottage, Emily allowed herself to imagine it, a life where she didn't have to give up Lily and Jack, where she could watch them grow, be part of their story, where James was more than just the father of her children, where the connection building between them could become something real. But imagination was dangerous territory. The next morning brought a reminder of reality. Dr. Morgan called with concerning news. Baby B's growth had slowed further. Emily needed to come in for immediate monitoring. James met her at the medical center, his face tight with worry. They sat together in the examination room as Dr. Morgan performed another ultrasound. "The blood flow discrepancy has increased," the doctor said carefully. "I'm recommending we deliver within the next 2 weeks. At 36 weeks, the twins should be developed enough, and the risk of waiting is becoming too high." 2 weeks. Emily's hand flew to her belly, as if she could somehow hold the twins inside, keep them safe in the only world they'd ever known. "What are the risks of early delivery?" James asked, his business voice firmly in place, controlled, seeking information, planning strategy. Dr. Morgan explained the possibilities: respiratory issues, jaundice, feeding difficulties. Minor complications compared to the risks of waiting, but complications nonetheless. Emily barely heard the details. 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, her body would no longer be their home. In 2 weeks, she would have to say goodbye. "Emily?" James's voice broke through her spiral. "Are you okay?" She realized she was crying, tears streaming silently down her face. "I'm not ready." Dr. Morgan excused herself tactfully, leaving them alone in the examination room. James pulled Emily into his arms, and she went willingly, pressing her face against his chest as sobs shook through her. "I know," he murmured into her hair. "I know. I thought I could do this. I thought I was strong enough, but James, I can't lose them. I can't lose any of you." The last words slipped out unbidden, revealing a truth Emily had been hiding even from herself. She had fallen for James, for his unexpected gentleness, his dry humor, the way he talked to her belly each visit, greeting Lily and Jack like they were already born. She had fallen for this impossible family they had accidentally created. James pulled back just enough to see her face. His eyes were dark, intense, searching. "Then don't," he said simply. "What? Don't lose us, Emily. I've been talking to lawyers, to counselors. There are options: shared custody, co-parenting arrangements, or—" He hesitated, then plunged forward. "Or we could get married." Emily stared at him, certain she had misheard. "Married? It would solve everything legally, give you full parental rights, make you their mother in every sense. We could—" "No." Emily stepped back, wrapping her arms around her belly. "No, that's insane. You can't marry someone just to make custody arrangements easier. It wouldn't just be for that." "Then why? Because you feel guilty? Because you think you owe me something?" "Because I care about you." James's voice rose. "Because over these past months you've become essential. Because I wake up thinking about whether you slept well, whether the twins kept you up with their moving around. Because I go to sleep planning what I'll bring you the next day, what excuse I can make to spend more time in that cottage that has somehow become more of a home than my mansion ever was." Emily's heart hammered. "James, it's the situation. The intensity of it. It's not real." "Isn't it?" He moved closer. "Emily, I loved my wife. I will always love her. But she's gone, and I've spent 3 years in a kind of suspended animation, neither living nor really grieving. You've woken me up. You and Lily and Jack, you've given me a reason to actually be present in my own life again. You barely know me. I know you sacrifice everything for the people you love. I know you talk to the twins when you think no one's listening, telling them stories about constellations and how maple syrup is made. I know you cry during sappy commercials and laugh at terrible jokes. I know you're terrified but facing it anyway, which is the definition of courage. Knowing someone's habits isn't the same as knowing their heart." James took her hand, placing it over his chest where she could feel his heartbeat, strong and rapid. "Then get to know mine. We have time, Emily. We have 2 weeks before the twins are born, and then we have the rest of our lives. I'm not asking you to make a decision right now. I'm just asking you not to give up on the possibility." Emily wanted to believe him. Wanted to believe in fairy tales, where the poor girl and the wealthy man could bridge their worlds, where desperate beginnings could lead to happy endings. But life had taught her that hope was a luxury she couldn't afford. "I need to think," she whispered. James nodded, not releasing her hand. "Think about it. Think about all of it. But Emily, please know, whatever you decide, you won't lose the twins. I won't let that happen. Even if you don't want me, even if the idea of us together is impossible for you, we'll find a way for you to be their mother. You do that. Give up control, share them with me, even if I rejected you." In a heartbeat. James smiled, sad but genuine. "They need you. I've watched you with them these past months. You're already their mother in every way that matters. Legal documents don't change that." That night, Emily lay awake in the cottage, her hands on her belly, where Lily and Jack slept peacefully for once. She thought about James's proposal, about the impossibility and the temptation of it. She thought about her own mother, who had sacrificed so much for her daughters, about her father, who had worked himself to death trying to provide, about Sarah, studying hard at community college, building a future on the foundation Emily had provided. Her phone buzzed with a text from James. "I meant what I said, all of it. Sleep well." Emily typed back, "The twins are kicking. I think they heard your voice earlier and miss it." The response came quickly. "Should I come back? I can read to them, talk them to sleep." It was nearly midnight. It was absurd. It was everything Emily wanted. "Yes," she typed. "Please come back." 20 minutes later, James arrived at the cottage, breathless and rumpled. Without a word, he sat beside Emily on the couch, placed his hand on her belly and began to talk, telling Lily and Jack about the stars visible through the cottage windows, about the mountains surrounding Ridgemont, about all the adventures awaiting them in the world beyond their mother's womb. Emily listened to his voice wash over them, deep and warm and full of love. She felt the twins settle, responding to their father's presence. And she felt something in herself settle too, a decision made not with her head, but with her heart. "James," she said softly, interrupting his story about a constellation shaped like a hunter. "Yes? Ask me again. In 2 weeks, when the twins are here and we're all together, ask me again about marriage, about building a family, about taking this impossible situation and making it work." James's eyes met hers, and in them she saw hope, fierce and bright. "And what will you say?" Emily smiled, really smiled, for the first time in months. "Come back in 2 weeks and find out." It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either. It was possibility, fragile and new, just like the life they had created together. And for now, for this moment, that was enough. The contractions started on a Tuesday morning, gentle and irregular, like a distant storm approaching slowly. Emily was in the cottage kitchen, attempting to make breakfast, when the first one hit. She gripped the counter, breathing through the tightening band around her middle, and glanced at the calendar. 36 weeks exactly, right on schedule, as Dr. Morgan had predicted. She should call the doctor. She should call James. But for a moment, Emily just stood there, her hand on her belly, feeling Lily and Jack moving restlessly inside her. This was it. The beginning of the end of their time together as one body, one heartbeat. "It's okay," she whispered to them. "We're going to be okay, all of us." By the time James arrived, breaking what must have been every speed limit between his office and the cottage, the contractions were coming every 8 minutes. He burst through the door, his usually impeccable appearance disheveled, his eyes wild with fear and excitement. "Why didn't you call me immediately?" he demanded, even as he gathered the hospital bag they had packed together the week before. "I needed a few minutes. Just us." Emily gestured to her belly. "Before everything changes." James's expression softened. He crossed to her, cupping her face gently. "Everything already changed, Emily. The moment you walked into that clinic, the moment you agreed to do this, everything changed, and it's been the most terrifying and wonderful change of my life." Another contraction hit, stronger this time, and Emily doubled over. James's arms were around her immediately, supporting her weight, breathing with her until it passed. "Okay," Emily gasped when she could speak again. "Now we can go." The drive to Ridgemont Medical Center was a blur of increasingly intense contractions and James's steady stream of encouragement. Rachel met them at the entrance. James had called her on the way, and she took Emily's hand with a squeeze that conveyed everything words couldn't. "You've got this," Rachel said firmly. "And we've got you." The labor and delivery ward was a flurry of activity. Nurses hooked Emily up to monitors, IV lines were inserted, and Dr. Morgan appeared with her calm, professional demeanor firmly in place. "Both babies are doing well," she announced after checking the monitors. "Heart rates are strong, but Emily, your blood pressure is elevated. We need to watch that carefully." The hours blurred together. Emily had thought she knew pain. She had endured her father's death, her mother's illness, the grinding poverty that had defined her life. But this was different. This was pain with purpose, her body working to bring Lily and Jack into the world. James never left her side. He held her hand through contractions that made her scream, wiped her face with cool cloths, and murmured encouragement when she was certain she couldn't continue. "I can't do this," Emily sobbed during a particularly brutal contraction. "I can't." "You can," James insisted, his face close to hers. "Emily, you're the strongest person I know. You've already done the impossible. You've given me hope again. This is just one more step." "Tell me about them," Emily gasped as the contraction eased. "Tell me what they'll be like." James smiled, brushing sweat-dampened hair from her forehead. "Lily will be thoughtful, I think. Quiet strength like her mother. She'll probably be the one reading in corners while Jack climbs trees and explores. Jack will be fearless, always pushing boundaries, always curious about everything." "How do you know?" "Because that's how they've been with you. That's who they already are." 6 hours into labor, Dr. Morgan's expression grew concerned. "Emily, your blood pressure is continuing to rise. We need to consider a C-section." "No," Emily said immediately. "I want to deliver naturally. I want—" Another contraction cut off her words, and this one was different, sharper, more urgent. Emily felt something shift inside her, a sensation of movement and pressure. "I need to push," she gasped. "Dr. Morgan, I need to push now." The doctor checked quickly, her eyes widening. "You're fully dilated." "Okay, Emily, on the next contraction, I want you to push. James, support her shoulders." What followed was a chaos of sensation, pain and pressure, and James's voice in her ear, telling her she was amazing, she was doing so well, just a little more. Emily pushed with everything she had, her entire world narrowing to this single purpose. "The head is crowning, Doctor," Morgan announced. "One more push, Emily. One more, and baby A will be here." Emily bore down with a scream that seemed to tear from her very soul, and then suddenly there was release. A baby's cry filled the room, high and indignant, the most beautiful sound Emily had ever heard. "It's a girl," Dr. Morgan announced, holding up a tiny, squirming bundle. "Lily, say hello to your parents." Lily, their daughter. Emily had only a moment to glimpse her, red-faced and perfect, with a shock of dark hair, before the next contraction hit. "Baby B is coming fast," Dr. Morgan warned. "Emily, I need you to push again." But something was wrong. Emily could feel it. The pain was different now, sharper, and the monitors were beeping frantically. "Her blood pressure is spiking," a nurse called out, "and baby B's heart rate is dropping." Dr. Morgan's face was grim. "We need to get this baby out now. Emily, on 3, I need the biggest push you've ever given. 1, 2, 3. Emily pushed, stars exploding behind her eyes from the effort. She heard shouting, felt hands supporting her, and then another cry, weaker than Lily's, but there, alive. "It's a boy," Dr. Morgan said, but her voice was tight with concern. "NICU team, I need you here now." Emily tried to see, tried to understand what was happening, but her vision was blurring. She heard James calling her name, felt his hand gripping hers desperately. "Jack," she whispered. "Is Jack okay?" "His breathing is compromised," Dr. Morgan explained, already working on the tiny baby. "He's smaller than expected, and his lungs aren't quite ready. We need to get him to the NICU immediately." "No." Emily tried to sit up, but her body wouldn't cooperate. "I need to see him. I need to—" "Emily, your blood pressure is dangerously high," Dr. Morgan said firmly. "You're showing signs of postpartum preeclampsia. I need to stabilize you before—" The world tilted. Emily felt herself falling, heard James shouting, and then there was only darkness. She woke to the sound of machines beeping and fluorescent lights burning overhead. Her body felt heavy, foreign. For a moment she couldn't remember where she was or why. Then it all came rushing back. The labor, Lily's cry, Jack's silence. "They're okay," James's voice came from beside her bed. He looked exhausted, his hair standing on end, his shirt wrinkled, but his eyes were bright with tears and joy. "Emily, they're both okay. You're okay." "Jack?" Her voice was hoarse, raw. "He's in the NICU on breathing support, but he's stable. The doctors say he's a fighter. He just needed a little extra help getting started." James took her hand, raising it to his lips. "You scared me. You passed out from the blood pressure spike, and they had to give you medication to bring it down. You've been unconscious for 3 hours. 3 hours." Emily's chest tightened. "I haven't even held them. I know. But Emily, there's something you need to know." James's expression was strange, part wonder, part fear. "When Jack was born, when they were running tests in the NICU, they did genetic screening, standard procedure for preemies." Emily's heart began to pound. "What did they find?" "He's mine. Biologically, definitively mine." The doctors were shocked. They said given my medical history, conception should have been impossible. "But Emily," he paused, swallowing hard, "there's more. When they compared Jack's and Lily's genetics, they found something unusual, something that doesn't make sense given our arrangement." "I don't understand." James pulled out his phone, showing her a document filled with medical terminology. "The genetic counselor explained it to me. Emily, the twins aren't identical, but they're more genetically similar than typical fraternal twins should be. And there's no genetic material from any donor eggs, no—" He stopped, his eyes searching hers. "Emily, is there something you haven't told me? About the procedure? About how this pregnancy happened?" Emily's mind raced. She thought back to that day at the clinic, to Dr. Morgan's clinical explanations, to signing forms she barely understood in her desperation. "I don't know what you mean. They said it was in vitro, that they would use your genetic material and donor eggs, that—" She stopped. Donor eggs. That's what she had assumed, what had been implied. But had anyone actually said that explicitly? "Emily," James said carefully, "the genetic tests show that you're not just the surrogate. You're their biological mother. Both of them. Somehow, impossibly, these are our children, not just mine, ours." The words didn't make sense, couldn't make sense. "But that's not possible. I'm a virgin. We never—" Understanding dawned in James's eyes. "The procedure. Something went wrong. Or maybe it went exactly right. Instead of using donor eggs, they must have fertilized your eggs with my genetic material. Emily, this wasn't traditional surrogacy. This was conception. You didn't just carry my children. You gave birth to our children. Our children." The words echoed in Emily's mind, reshaping everything she thought she knew about the past 9 months. "Dr. Morgan," Emily said suddenly. "She needs to explain this. She needs to tell me exactly what happened in that clinic." But even as she said it, Emily knew the truth didn't really matter. Whether through medical error or intentional deception or simple miracle, the result was the same. Lily and Jack weren't just James's children who she had carried. They were hers. Truly, completely, legally hers. "I need to see them," Emily said, trying to sit up. "I need to see our children." James helped her into a wheelchair. Her body was still weak from the delivery and the blood pressure crisis. They went first to the NICU, where Jack lay in an incubator, tiny and fragile, but breathing on his own now, the breathing tube already removed. "He's strong," the nurse said, smiling. "Stronger than he looks. He'll probably be ready to go home in a week or so." Home. Emily stared at her son through the clear plastic of the incubator, at his miniature fingers and the dark hair that matched his sister's. James stood beside her, his hand on her shoulder, and together they watched their son sleep. Then they went to the regular nursery where Lily was waiting. A nurse placed the baby girl in Emily's arms, and Emily looked down at her daughter, not someone else's daughter she was simply carrying for the first time. Lily's eyes were closed, but she turned toward Emily's chest, seeking instinctively. She had James's dark hair, but Emily's delicate features. She was perfect, impossibly perfect, and completely theirs. "Hi, Lily," Emily whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Hi, sweet girl. I'm your mama, and I'm never letting you go." James knelt beside the wheelchair, his arm around Emily, his free hand touching Lily's tiny fist. The baby's fingers wrapped around his thumb, holding tight. "We're a family," James said, his voice thick with emotion. "However it happened, whatever mistakes or miracles brought us here, we're a family now." Emily looked at him, at this man who had started as a stranger, become an employer, transformed into a friend, and now was the father of her children. "The contract is void, meaningless. You can't contract away biological parenthood, Emily. These are your children, legally, morally, in every way that matters, which means—" He paused, then smiled through his tears. "Which means, I'm asking again, marry me. Not because of custody or legal arrangements, but because I love you. Because somewhere between that first ultrasound and this moment, I fell completely in love with you." Emily looked at Lily, sleeping peacefully in her arms. She thought of Jack, fighting in the NICU with the same determination she had shown her whole life. She thought of the journey that had brought them here. Desperation transformed into love, transaction become family. "Yes," she said, the words simple but containing everything. "Yes, I'll marry you. Yes to all of it." James kissed her then, gentle and sweet, careful of the baby between them. When they pulled apart, both were crying and laughing simultaneously. "I need to tell my mother," Emily said suddenly, "and Sarah. They think I'm just a surrogate, that I'm giving the babies away. They need to know the truth. We'll tell them together," James promised. "We'll tell everyone. No more secrets, no more contracts, no more pretending this is anything other than what it is. A family, brought together in the most unexpected way possible." That night, as Emily rested in her hospital bed, with Lily sleeping in a bassinet beside her and James keeping vigil in the chair, Rachel appeared in the doorway. "I heard," she said simply, "about the genetic tests, about everything." "Emily, how are you feeling?" "Terrified," Emily admitted, "overwhelmed, happier than I ever thought possible, all at once." Rachel smiled, moving to look at Lily. "She's beautiful. They both are. And you know what? I'm not even surprised. From the moment I met you, I knew this story was never going to be simple. You think we can make it work? Really work?" Rachel looked at James, who had dozed off in the uncomfortable hospital chair, his hand still reaching toward Emily's bed. She looked at Emily, at the fierce love already evident in how she held her daughter, and she smiled. "Emily Carter, you've spent your whole life making impossible things work. Why should this be any different?" And watching Lily sleep, feeling the phantom sensation of Jack's presence, even though he was floors away in the NICU, Emily allowed herself to believe it. To believe in second chances and unexpected endings, in love that grew from desperation into something real and lasting. The journey wasn't over. There would be challenges ahead, explaining to her family, integrating her old life with her new one, learning to be a mother while James learned to be a father. But for the first time in her life, Emily wasn't facing those challenges alone. She had James, she had Lily and Jack, she had Rachel and the beginning of a community in Ridgemont. Most importantly, she had herself, stronger than she had ever known, braver than she had ever believed, and worthy of the love and family she had found in the most unexpected place. The impossible had become possible, and it was only the beginning. Winter arrived in Ridgemont with the kind of snow that transformed the world into something magical, soft, silent, and full of promise. Emily stood at the window of what had once been James's house and was now their home, watching the flakes drift down onto the manicured lawn. In her arms, Lily slept peacefully, her tiny body warm and solid against Emily's chest. From the nursery down the hall, she could hear James talking softly to Jack, telling him a story about a brave little boy who conquered mountains. 6 weeks had passed since the birth. 6 weeks of sleepless nights and endless feedings, of learning to navigate parenthood and partnership simultaneously. 6 weeks of falling more deeply in love with James, with their children, with the life they were building together. The revelation about Emily's biological connection to the twins had sent shockwaves through everyone involved. Dr. Morgan had been mortified, launching an immediate investigation into the clinic's procedures. What they discovered was a series of miscommunications and errors. The donor eggs had never been properly acquired, and in the confusion, the embryologist had fertilized Emily's own eggs instead. What should have been an impossible pregnancy had become a miracle, hidden in medical incompetence. "We could sue," James's lawyer had said during one of their many meetings. "This is clear malpractice. The clinic failed in their duty of care, failed to properly inform Miss Carter of what was happening to her body." But Emily had refused. "They gave me Lily and Jack," she said simply. "They gave me James. How can I punish them for the best mistake of my life?" In the end, the clinic had settled quietly, covering all medical expenses and setting up a trust fund for the twins. Dr. Morgan had resigned, her career in reproductive medicine over, but she had sent a letter to Emily before leaving town. "I don't expect forgiveness," it read. "What happened was inexcusable. But I want you to know that when I saw those embryos developing, when I saw how well your body accepted them, some part of me knew. I should have told you then. I should have given you the choice. Instead, I told myself that what you didn't know couldn't hurt you, that the outcome justified the deception. I was wrong. But Emily, watching you with those babies, seeing the family you've built, that's the only thing that lets me sleep at night. You've taken my greatest professional failure and turned it into something beautiful." Emily had cried when she read it, and James had held her while she worked through the complex emotions, anger at the deception, gratitude for the result, forgiveness that came not from forgetting, but from choosing not to let the past poison their future. "Emily?" James's voice pulled her from her thoughts. He stood in the nursery doorway, Jack cradled in his arms. Their son had come home from the NICU after 10 days, smaller than Lily, but fierce and determined. Now, at 6 weeks, he was thriving, gaining weight, meeting milestones, proving that his difficult entry into the world was just the first of many challenges he would overcome. "I was just thinking," Emily said, moving to join him. They stood together in the hallway, each holding a sleeping baby, and James kissed her forehead gently. About how far we've come. 6 months ago, I was a stranger signing a contract. Now I'm standing in our house, holding our daughter, about to marry you. It's surreal." "Speaking of which," James said, his eyes twinkling, "Rachel called. She wants to know if you've made any decisions about the wedding." The wedding. They had planned it for the spring, a small ceremony in Ridgemont, with just close family and friends. Emily's mother and Sarah were coming. They had driven up 2 weeks after the births, and the reunion had been tearful and joyful. Emily had explained everything, expecting judgment or disappointment. Instead, her mother had simply held her and said, "You've always known how to turn hardship into hope, my girl. Always." Sarah had been more dramatic, alternating between tears and laughter as she held her niece and nephew. "You're telling me you accidentally became a mom to a millionaire's babies and fell in love with him? Emily, your life is literally a romance novel." "It's not that simple," Emily had protested, but Sarah had just grinned. "It never is, but that doesn't make it any less wonderful." Now, standing with James in their home, Emily felt the truth of those words. It wasn't simple. They were still learning each other, still navigating the practical realities of merging their vastly different worlds. James's business associates were bemused by his sudden domestication. Emily's friends from Millbrook couldn't quite believe the transformation in her circumstances, but love rarely followed simple paths. "I was thinking," Emily said carefully, "what if we moved the wedding up? Had it here at the house next month? I don't want to wait until spring. I want to start our marriage now, while Lily and Jack are still tiny. I want them there, as much as they can be at 6 weeks old." James's smile was brilliant. "I love that idea. Rachel can help plan it. She's been dying to, you know. She's already designed 3 different invitation concepts without being asked." Emily laughed. Rachel had become not just a friend, but a sister, supporting Emily through the challenging early weeks of motherhood with the wisdom of someone slightly ahead in the journey. Her own son, Matthew, had been born in February, and the 2 women had formed a bond that went beyond circumstance into genuine connection. "There's something else," Emily said, suddenly serious. "I want to do something for Millbrook, For the community that raised me, that struggled alongside me. What are you thinking? A foundation, something that helps families like mine, the ones crushed by medical debt, by circumstances beyond their control. We could offer grants for education, assistance with bills, support for single parents. We have the resources now, James. We could make a real difference. James shifted Jack to one arm so he could take Emily's free hand. We'll start it together, the Carter Thompson Foundation. And Emily, we'll make sure every person who receives help knows it comes from someone who understands their struggle because she lived it. Tears pricked Emily's eyes. Have I told you lately that I love you? Not in the last hour, James teased. I was starting to worry. I love you, Emily said, meaning it with every fiber of her being. I love you for seeing me when I was invisible, for valuing me when I thought I had nothing to offer, for giving me not just Lily and Jack, but a reason to believe I deserved them. Emily Carter, you've always deserved the world. It just took the world a while to catch up. James kissed her, careful of the babies between them. Now, shall we put these two down for their nap so I can show you the nursery renovations I've been working on? They placed Lily and Jack in their cribs, separate for now, though they often ended up pushed together, the twins seeking each other's comfort. Emily and James stood watching them sleep, their hands intertwined. Do you think they'll remember any of this? Emily wondered. The complicated beginning, the contract, all of it? They'll know the truth, because we'll tell them, James said firmly. Age appropriately, honestly. But Emily, what they'll remember most is being loved. By you, by me, by everyone around them. The how of their arrival will just be part of their story. The part that taught us all that families come together in mysterious ways. As if in response, Jack stirred, his tiny hand reaching across the small space between cribs. Lily's hand moved to meet his, their fingers tangling together even in sleep. The wedding took place on a February afternoon, with snow falling softly outside the windows of the Thompson house. Emily wore a simple white dress, elegant but practical, chosen for easy nursing access, because Lily and Jack's feeding schedule waited for no one, not even their mother's wedding. Sarah stood as maid of honor, tears streaming down her face through the entire ceremony. Emily's mother sat in the front row, weak but radiant, holding baby Jack while Rachel held Lily. James's business partner served as best man, looking slightly bewildered by the whole affair, but genuinely happy for his friend. The vows they exchanged were their own, written together late at night between feedings, promising not perfection but partnership, not ease but effort, not a fairy tale, but a real love built on real foundation. I promise to honor your strength, James said, his voice steady but his eyes wet, even when you can't see it yourself. I promise to be the partner you deserve, not the savior you never needed. I promise to love our children with everything I am, and to never let them forget that their mother is the bravest person I know. And I promise, Emily Carter, to spend every day of our lives proving that you didn't just give me a family, you gave me a future worth living. Emily's own vows came through tears. I promise to trust in this love, even when the scared girl from Millbrook whispers that I don't deserve it. I promise to be your equal partner, bringing my whole self to our marriage, including the broken parts, the scared parts, the parts that still can't quite believe this is real. I promise to love Lily and Jack with all I am, and to raise them knowing that love isn't about perfection, but about showing up, even when it's hard. And James Thompson, I promise to remind you every day that you didn't rescue me, we rescued each other. When they kissed, sealing their vows, Jack began to cry, a healthy, demanding wail that had everyone laughing. Emily broke away from James to take their son from her mother's arms, and James gathered Lily, and they stood there as a family, complete and imperfect, and wholly theirs. The reception was small, intimate, held in the house's great room with its soaring windows overlooking the snow-covered mountains. Emily danced with James, while Rachel and David took turns holding the twins. She danced with her mother, who whispered, "Your father would be so proud." She danced with Sarah, who said, "You know, I'm writing a paper about economic mobility for my sociology class. Mind if I use your story?" "Only if you change the names," Emily laughed. "I don't think anyone would believe it anyway." As evening fell and guests began to leave, Emily found herself alone for a moment in the nursery. She stood between the two cribs, looking at her sleeping children, still amazed that they were real, that they were hers. James found her there, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "What are you thinking, Mrs. Thompson?" "Mrs. Thompson." Emily had insisted on hyphenating Carter Thompson, refusing to erase where she came from, even as she embraced where she was going. "I'm thinking about the girl who walked into that clinic 9 months ago," Emily said softly. How terrified she was. How certain she was that this was just a transaction, just survival. How wrong she was about everything. "Not everything," James murmured against her hair. "She was right about the most important thing." "What's that?" "That love was worth the risk. She just didn't know it would be her own heart she was risking." Emily turned in his arms, looking up at the man who had become her husband, her partner, the father of her children. "You know what the strangest part is? I went into this thinking I was selling my body for 9 months. But James, I wasn't selling anything. I was investing. In them, in us, in a future I couldn't even imagine." "Best investment I ever made," James said, kissing her forehead. $50,000 for the love of my life and 2 perfect children. That's what I call a return." Emily swatted him playfully. "You're terrible at romance. I'm terrible at a lot of things. But loving you, that's the one thing I know I'll never get wrong." Later, after the last guests had left and the twins were fed and sleeping peacefully, Emily and James sat together on the couch in the living room. The house was quiet, peaceful, full of the gentle sounds of their new life, the hum of baby monitors, the tick of the grandfather clock in the hall, the soft breathing of sleep. "I have something for you," James said, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a small envelope, worn at the edges. "I found this in my study a few weeks ago. It's the original contract we signed, the surrogacy agreement." Emily took it, her hands trembling slightly. She hadn't seen it since that day at the clinic, hadn't wanted to think about the cold legal language that had defined what they were supposed to be. "I want you to destroy it," James said. "Burn it, shred it, whatever feels right. Because, Emily, that contract was a lie from the beginning. Not legally. We know the clinic screwed up the procedures. But cosmically, spiritually, however you want to define it, we were never supposed to be a transaction. We were always supposed to be this." Emily looked at the envelope, thinking about everything it represented: desperation and hope, fear and courage, an ending that had become a beginning. Then she walked to the fireplace, where embers still glowed from the evening's fire, and tossed it in. They watched it burn together, the pages curling and blackening, the words disappearing into ash and smoke. The contract that had brought them together consumed by flames, leaving only what was real: their love, their family, their choice to be together, not because of legal obligation, but because of hearts that had found each other in the most unlikely circumstances. "No more contracts," Emily said, leaning against James. "Just promises." "Just promises," he agreed. "The kind we make every day, in every choice, in every moment we choose each other." A soft cry came from the nursery. Lily, waking for her late-night feeding. Emily started to rise, but James stopped her. "Let me," he said. "You've been on your feet all day. Besides, I want some time alone with our daughter." Emily watched him go, this man who had transformed from stranger to employer to beloved in the space of 9 months. She thought about the journey that had brought them here, about every choice and chance and miracle that had aligned to create this moment. Her phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Mom's home safe." She cried the whole way, happy tears. "She says to tell you she loves you and she's so proud. We both are." Emily typed back, "I love you both too. Come visit soon. The twins need their aunt and grandmother." Another text came, this time from Rachel. "Beautiful wedding, beautiful family, beautiful life. You've earned it all, Emily, every bit of happiness. Emily smiled, tucking her phone away. Earned it. Maybe that was the lesson in all of this, that happiness wasn't something gifted by circumstance or bought with money or stumbled into by accident. It was something you earned through courage, through the willingness to risk your heart, through the choice to keep loving even when it terrified you. She had walked into that clinic 9 months ago, carrying the weight of her family's survival on her shoulders. She had agreed to carry a stranger's children, to give them life and then give them away. She had thought she was selling herself, piece by piece, for the chance to save the people she loved. Instead, she had found herself, found her strength, her worth, her capacity for love that went beyond transaction or duty. Found a man who saw her not as a convenience or a vessel, but as an equal, a partner, a woman worthy of love and respect. Found children who would grow up knowing they were wanted, cherished, the products of an unconventional love story that proved families could bloom in the most unexpected soil. James returned carrying Lily, who was now wide awake and hungry. Emily positioned herself to nurse, and James sat beside her, his arm around her shoulders, watching their daughter feed with the same wonder he'd shown since the first moment he'd seen her. "Do you ever think about how different things could have been?" Emily asked softly. "If the clinic hadn't made that mistake, if those had been donor eggs instead of mine." James was quiet for a moment, considering. "Sometimes. And you know what I think? I think we would have found our way to each other anyway, maybe not as quickly, maybe not through the twins. But Emily, some connections are inevitable. I truly believe that. That's very romantic for a businessman. You bring out the romantic in me, among other things." Emily laughed, feeling Lily's tiny hand knead against her breast as she nursed. "Like what?" "Patience, humility, the ability to function on 2 hours of sleep. A whole new appreciation for coffee." James pressed a kiss to Emily's temple. "But mostly, you bring out the best in me, the me I was supposed to be before life and loss made me forget." "I think your wife would have liked us," Emily said suddenly. "Elena, I think she would have wanted this for you, to be happy again, to be a father, to find love." James's eyes grew distant, sad, but at peace. "She would have loved you. For your strength, your kindness, your refusal to accept less than you deserve, even when the world tried to convince you otherwise. And she would have adored Lily and Jack, probably would have spoiled them rotten." "Tell me about her?" Emily asked. "Not the sad parts, the good parts. I want to know her so I can tell the twins about her someday." So James talked, sharing memories of his first love while holding his second, painting a picture of a woman who had faced death with grace and lived life with passion. Emily listened, nursing their daughter, understanding that love didn't diminish love. It multiplied, creating space for past and present and future to coexist. When Lily finished eating and had been burped and changed and placed back in her crib, Emily and James stood together in the nursery doorway, watching both twins sleep. "What do you think they'll be like?" Emily wondered. "When they're grown, what will they remember of all this?" "I think Lily will be thoughtful, artistic maybe," James mused. "She'll probably write poetry or paint or find some way to express the depth she already seems to carry. And Jack will be the adventurer, the one who pushes boundaries and asks impossible questions and refuses to accept that anything is out of reach." "Like their parents," Emily said with a smile. "Exactly like their parents. They'll have your courage and my stubbornness, your compassion and my drive. They'll be impossible and wonderful, and they'll know they're loved. That's all that really matters." Emily leaned her head against James's shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him, the reality of this life they had built. "I used to think love was something that happened to other people. People with money, with opportunities, with futures that weren't already written in poverty and limitation. I thought it was a luxury I couldn't afford. And now? Now I know it's not a luxury at all. It's the most necessary thing. The thing that makes everything else possible. Without love, your love, the twins' love, even the love I've learned to have for myself, none of this would matter. The money, the house, the security, it would all be empty." James turned her to face him, his hands cupping her face gently. "Emily Carter Thompson, you are the wisest person I know. and the bravest, and the most beautiful, inside and out. I will spend the rest of my life making sure you know that you never forget your own worth. Just love me, Emily said simply. That's all I need. Just keep loving me, broken pieces and all. The broken pieces are what make you beautiful, James whispered against her lips. They're the cracks where the light gets in. And Emily, you shine so bright. They kissed then, soft and sweet, a promise renewed. And from the nursery, as if in blessing, came the gentle sounds of their children sleeping. Steady breaths, soft sighs, the music of new life beginning. Spring came to Ridgemont with explosive color, cherry blossoms and daffodils, tulips and hyacinths transforming the world into something hopeful. The Carter Thompson Foundation opened its doors on a sunny April morning, housed in a renovated building on Ridgemont's Main Street. Emily stood at the entrance, holding Jack, while James held Lily, and cut the ribbon alongside her mother and Sarah. Inside, the walls were covered with photographs, images of Millbrook, of the struggling families who would be helped, of the future they were building together. There was a photo of Emily at 16, exhausted and determined, working one of her 3 jobs. It was labeled simply, "This is why we do this work. We're here to help families like mine was," Emily said in her speech, her voice stronger than she'd ever heard it. "Families who are drowning in circumstances beyond their control. We're here to say, you're not alone, you're not forgotten, and your struggles don't define your worth or your children's futures." The first grant went to a single mother in Millbrook, whose story could have been Emily's own. Medical debt, children to feed, hope running thin. The woman cried when Emily handed her the check, and Emily held her, understanding exactly what she was feeling. "Pass it forward," Emily told her. "Someday, when you're stable, when you're through the worst of it, find someone else who needs help and give it. That's all we ask." By summer, the foundation had helped dozens of families. Emily worked part-time, balancing the needs of the foundation with the demands of motherhood. James had restructured his business, delegating more so he could be present for the twins' first smiles, first laughs, first attempts at rolling over. They were happy, imperfectly, messily, completely happy. One evening in late June, as the twins approached 6 months old, Emily found James in his study, looking at photographs on his computer. She recognized them, pictures from the wedding, from the twins' birth, from the foundation opening. Moments of their new life, captured and preserved. "What are you doing?" she asked, settling into the chair beside him. "Making a book," James said, showing her the screen. "For Lily and Jack, their story from the beginning. I want them to have it when they're old enough to understand." Emily looked at the pages he'd created. The timeline of their improbable love story, from the first contract signing to the wedding, from desperation to joy. He had included everything, even the painful parts, because this was their truth. "It's perfect," Emily whispered. "But James, can I add one thing?" "Of course." Emily took the keyboard, typing a final page for the book. "Dear Lily and Jack, by the time you read this, you'll probably have questions. About how you came to be, about the unusual circumstances of your birth, about whether you were planned or wanted or loved. Here's what we want you to know. You were all of those things, just not in the way we expected. Your father wanted you desperately, even when everyone told him it was impossible. Your mother, me, didn't know she wanted you until you were already growing inside her. But from the moment we knew you existed, from the very first heartbeat we heard on that ultrasound, you were loved. You were born from a mistake that became a miracle, from a business transaction that transformed into a love story, from 2 broken people who found wholeness in becoming your parents. Life will try to tell you that you need to follow certain paths, fit certain molds, become who others expect you to be. But your very existence proves that the best things in life come from broken plans and unexpected turns, and the courage to embrace what is, rather than mourn what isn't. You are our greatest adventure, our most profound joy, The evidence that love doesn't follow rules or schedules or logical progression. It simply is, wild and wonderful and worth every risk. We love you. We have always loved you. And we will continue loving you through every chapter of your story, which is only beginning. With all our hearts, Mom and Dad James read it, tears streaming down his face. Perfect, he said. It's absolutely perfect. They printed the book that night, a beautiful leather-bound volume that would sit on the shelf in the nursery, waiting for the day when Lily and Jack were old enough to understand their own story. As summer faded into autumn, the twins continued to grow and thrive. Jack hit milestones ahead of schedule, as if making up for his difficult start. Lily was more contemplative, watching the world with serious eyes before gracing them with her rare, beautiful smiles. On the anniversary of the day Emily had signed the contract, that day that had changed everything, she and James returned to the cottage where she had spent her pregnancy. It had been kept as a guest house, but they hadn't visited since before the twins were born. Walking through the rooms, Emily remembered those lonely months. The fear and isolation, the growing love for the babies she thought she'd have to give away, the slow blossoming of connection with James that had terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. "I was so scared here," she said, standing in the living room where James had first felt the twins' kick, "so certain I was going to lose everything that mattered. And instead you found everything you needed," James said, pulling her close, "including yourself." Emily thought about that, about the girl she'd been and the woman she'd become. The transformation hadn't been about money or status or marrying well. It had been about learning to value herself, to see her own worth, to believe she deserved love and happiness and all the good things life could offer. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what? For seeing me. For believing I was worth fighting for, even when I didn't believe it myself. For giving me not just a family, but a life I never dared to dream of." James kissed her forehead, gentle and reverent. "Emily, you gave yourself that life. I just had the privilege of being part of it, of witnessing your strength, your courage, your capacity for love. You saved yourself. I was just lucky enough to be there when you did." They locked up the cottage as the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. In the car, driving back to their home where the twins waited with their grandmother and Sarah, Emily felt a profound sense of peace. This was her life now. Not perfect, not without challenges, but wholly and completely hers. Built not on desperation or transaction, but on love. Messy, complicated, beautiful love. The kind of love that transformed broken beginnings into happy endings. The kind of love that proved redemption was always possible. The kind of love that reminded her every single day that she had always been worthy of the happiness she'd found. As they pulled into the driveway, Emily could see through the window into their home. Sarah was dancing with Lily, making her giggle. Her mother sat in the rocking chair, holding Jack, singing softly. Their family, pieced together from broken parts, made whole through love. James took her hand as they walked to the door. "Ready?" Emily smiled, thinking about everything that had brought them here. Every mistake and miracle, every moment of fear and courage, every step on the journey from stranger to family. "I'm ready," she said, "for all of it. Today, tomorrow, whatever comes next. As long as we're together, I'm ready for anything." And she was. For the first time in her life, Emily Carter Thompson was truly, completely ready. Not just for survival, but for joy. Not just for endurance, but for love. Not just for the next challenge, but for the beautiful, messy, miraculous adventure of the life she had earned. She opened the door, stepping into the warmth and noise and love of her home. And as Jack's eyes found her and lit up with recognition, as Lily reached her tiny arms out for her mother, Emily knew with absolute certainty this was what happy endings looked like. Not perfect, but real. Not simple, but true. Not the end of the story, but the beginning of everything that mattered. And it was more than enough. It was everything. The end.